Hey, this is Katie and Catherine, and we're here to give you the 411K. Cheers!
Bari Tessler Linden is a financial therapist, mentor, mamapreneur, and the founder of The Art of Money. She has guided thousands of people to new, empowered, and refreshingly honest relationships with money through her nurturing, body-centered approach. Her methodology weaves together personal, couple, and creative entrepreneurial money teachings into one complete tapestry. She is the founder of The Art of Money, a year-long money school which integrates money healing, money practices, and money maps.
So Bari, just to start, I know you probably get this question all the time. Tell us a little bit about your money story and how it helped you to get where you are today.
My money story. It's made up of our experience, our history, our beliefs, our personality, our nature, the positive things, the negative things, some trauma, all of it, right? We then create a story that we live out, and these stories can be changed and altered and fine-tuned. So just know, I'm still working on my money story. I'm still understanding my money story, but I'll give you some of the highlights. So I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in a middle-class family of entrepreneurs. I knew my father was an entrepreneur. I never really called my mother an entrepreneur, but they worked together and they owned some real estate and bars. And so my dad was kind of the front guy. He made all the deals. And my mom, she was behind the scenes, but she did all of the bookkeeping. And it didn't really register that my mother did all of the bookkeeping of my parents' business. And then at some point, I even found out that her mother, so my grandmother, did bookkeeping as well. I didn't know any of this. Somehow it didn't even get in. But I grew up, as I said, middle class. And so what that was like for me was twofold. There was certainly generosity in my family. If I wanted to go take a dance class, I could. I also had to work from the age of 15 on. My father wanted to teach me a good work ethic. So he kind of just threw me out at the age of 15 and said, go apply to 5 or 6 jobs, over the weekend and come back and tell me about it and pick one. And I was like, what is it? How do you do that? So there was the generosity on the one hand. And then on the other hand, there were these expectations and conditions that weren't always spoken to directly. There wasn't direct teachings. And I can now have compassion and understanding for my parents. They were doing the best that they could based on who raised them, where they came from, what they were taught, what they were not taught about money. And my dad wanted me to work really young, which I think was good, even though I didn't like it at the time, because I really had no idea how was I going to go apply for a job. Do I apply for jobs in things that I'm interested in or that I would be good at? What is my skill set? I didn't know this as a 15-year-old, and none of that was really discussed or cultivated or supported. It was twofold: generosity and also unspoken conditions. I grew up feeling controlled around money, and I didn't like that, but I didn't know what to do with that as a teenager. And it kind of led into me deciding to take a different path, and I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I was still figuring things out, trying to find myself. But it wasn't until I finished college that my father's grand plan for me was to go to Japan to teach English and to come back speaking Japanese fluently and to be able to work with him in business. But what wound up happening in that moment is I decided to say no to my father and take a detour. And that was one of those really crucial moments where it was important for me to make a cut and say, I'm not doing what you want me to do. And even though he thought I was making the biggest mistake in my life, I chose to go to Israel for a year. And one day while I was on a kibbutz, and all of a sudden I thought I had an epiphany and thought I made up a whole field. I had grown up dancing and realized that I was going to put dance and therapy together, and I thought I made up an entire field called dance therapy, and I didn't. I learned that there were dance movement therapy and somatic psychology master's programs, and so I left Israel and I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I started graduate school to train to be a therapist. Thought I'd be working with couples around intimacy and sexuality. I also thought I'd be working with women around food and body, and again, sexuality and sensuality, and I also thought I'd be working a lot around grief and death. And so in my 20s, I just was studying to be a therapist, doing my internship work, working in the mental health field, getting ready to graduate. And when the school loan came due, that was a huge moment for me because it allowed me to see that I did not have any relationship to money. My bank statements would come in the mail while I was in graduate school. I would just literally just throw them out. The topic of money had been completely left out of my graduate school program. We talked about every other topic and theme and subject as we were training to be therapists, but we never talked about money. And when the school loan came due, it was one of those moments where I just totally freaked out and realized this is ridiculous. Not only did I not receive a financial education growing up in small increments from grade school on up, and then high school, and then college, in my graduate school program, as I was training to be a therapist to work with couples, on the surface, the biggest issue with couples is money. It's the biggest reason they get divorced. And of course, it's not really about money. It's about the deeper themes and issues that come up around money and that we don't know how to communicate around money. We weren't taught that. It was one of those crazy moments where I thought, I'm either going to go running away, traveling the world, and never paying the student loan back and never dealing with this, or I'm going to face this head on, just like I have every other big, scary, taboo, shadow topic in my life, and I'm going to take it on. But that moment when I realized I did not receive a financial education and I did not know how to pay back my student loan, I was working in the mental health field, making $11 an hour with a master's degree. I also was terrified. How was I going to be able to afford to pay back my student loan? How was I going to create a practice, a therapy practice? I was 28. I felt too young. I did not want to continue working in the mental health field as a social worker. The pay was not sustainable and do any level of self-care. But I did not see any pathways at the time. And I decided to listen deeply to my intuition and trust this next little detour that I was being presented. And I decided to stop working in the mental health field, take a job in an accounting department in an organic bakery, and start learning about numbers. And, I had grown up not being good at math, but, I'd always equated if I'm not good at math, I won't be good with money. And that's so far from the truth. I was taught QuickBooks and someone held my hand and was patient with me. And yes, it took months and, learned QuickBooks. And I had for 4 years a bookkeeping business for other therapists, established therapists, coaches, artists, and contractors. And I always say that I learned more about people's relationship to earning and spending and saving and giving by doing their books. They all just threw their bookkeeping at me. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. Most of them had no idea I had a master's in psychology. And it was a fascinating little detour, transition period where I ran the bookkeeping business. And then at the age of 32, I decided it was time to integrate all of my training as a therapist with all of that deep work of how to hold space for people when they're going through the ebbs and flows in life. And the same ebbs and flows that happen in life happen in money too. And it was time to put together all of my past training as a therapist with all of these new skills and systems that I was learning in the language of money and learning a bookkeeping system and training people how to learn how to review their numbers and the patterns of their numbers and what's coming in and what's going out, and start integrating that with their values and their life goals and their dreams. And I started my very first financial therapy practice where I saw private clients and I trained them in QuickBooks, but I was really starting to teach my beginning methodology in tiny little groups of 10 people for years until it became 20 people, until it became 50 people. And now 18 years later, I don't teach 10 people in 6-week groups anymore. I teach a year-long program with over 500 students from around the world. My methodology has become The Art of Money, and I published a book 3 years ago. That's where I am now with my career. I'm the mom of a 10-year-old. I've been with my husband for 18 years. And there's so many things about my story. I needed to not only make my own money, but I also needed to learn business and all these things that I thought I couldn't do or that I was afraid of, and learn how to create a livelihood where I was doing work that I loved and giving in the larger community and earning really well. Put that all together, and that merges so many components of my money story.
Thank you. I know reading your book, there's a lot of different money stories out there, and it really, the way you wrote your book and your methodology, it's extremely important for everyone to reflect on the way that they grew up with money and sort of how that has shaped them. I know I distance myself from thinking the way my parents necessarily interacted with money has shaped how I view money, just because I think we're in different places in how we approach money at the age I am now versus the way they did. But it's really interesting when I started trying to go back and look at my money memories and think of, oh yeah, that really did shape a viewpoint that I have now. And it clearly shows that it shaped your journey.
Bari, you sound like the queen of intersections. Like you just know how things all kind of cross over and fit together.
That's just how I think. My nature is that I tend to go to the micro, which has a lot of parts to it. So our own relationship to money, I start there first, then couples and money, families and money, and then your work and the community, where other people start with the macro side of money, and they go to the systems and they talk about our economic systems and race inequalities. And, there's that, they're equally as important.
In the art of money, you talk about 5 themes that emerge during people's money journey: safety, enoughness, responsibility, value, power. How do you see these impacting people's money decisions?
Any of these questions are huge, right? Financial literacy and emotional literacy need to go hand in hand for everyone, but especially women. It's about money because most of us did not receive a complete financial education from grade school on up. We received parts and pieces, certainly. Our mother may have taught us how to, reconcile our checkbooks, the manual checkbooks. I got that growing up. Or how to budget, or how to use a credit card. We may have learned parts and pieces, but not the full picture. And that's okay. That's okay. It's just real that, our parents did not have a complete financial education and they weren't able to pass one down. That's why it's about money. It's about money because we need to learn the language of money. We need to learn these bookkeeping systems. We learn our relationship to earning and spending and giving and saving and paying down debt and investing in all of that, right? Where it's not about money is that it touches on all of these deeper themes and issues. It's different for everyone. What are the themes that money connects to? I've even seen siblings, 2, 3 people raised in the same family. You would think they would have the same money styles or patterns or issues. They don't. Even if they were raised same parents, same grandparents, same area, they have different approaches. We all learn things from our parents, even if we do it different than them, even if we want to be the opposite of them. We learn positive and negative things, right? Whether they're directly teaching us about money or we're just watching by their behavior and their patterns. And so these themes start appearing, but really around 25 is when you can start reviewing how you were raised, bringing more awareness and mindfulness to who you are. What are your patterns? What's working? What's not? What are you bringing with you from your childhood? And you can start to go deeper. For some of us, it's all of them. So I work with people from all different economic backgrounds as well. People who come from wealthy families or who've inherited later in life, middle class or lower income. Some people call it working class. Some of my folks who come from that family will say, no, I grew up in a poor family. But I sometimes see all of these coming up, even no matter what economic background you came from. So safety issues can come up if you were raised without getting some of your needs met. But they can also come up around coming from a very wealthy family too. And safety issues can come up there as well. Value issues come up all across the economic spectrum, and you would think, well, if you come from a wealthy family, then you just shouldn't have any issues in life. But we all do. We're humans. And, someone from a wealthy family may feel guilty. They may feel they don't deserve the money that's been passed down to them. They may not be clear of what their worth or value is, and they may want to learn how to make their own money separate from their family. So value comes up for so many of us, and it's really questions around, is my worth connected to the dollar amounts in my bank accounts and my savings accounts, my salary? Really, it isn't. Our value and our worth does not come from how much money we make or how much money we save. Our value and worth comes because we're just a unique human, right? And at the same time, the exchange in our modern world is money. And so we need money to pay for the roof over our head and to pay for food and etc. And so we want to learn how to find out what our work is in the world Safety can come up with, I'll say one more about value. I have a lot of folks who under earn, and sometimes under earning is not even the dollar amount, because I have folks who make 30,000 working for a nonprofit and are very satisfied and feel very fulfilled. Someone else may be living in a bigger city, and $30,000, living in a city, living where they live, may feel like under earning. It comes down to, it's about the number amount and what kind of lifestyle you can create with that. But it's also how many hours are you working? I've known people to make six figures, multiple six figures, and we're working 60, 70 hours a week in an accounting firm. And I had a business partner at one point who felt as though she was under earning because of how much overgiving she was with time. So that's a little bit about value. But then I also have my high earners who their answer to everything is just to make more money. And that's where they feel they do get their value at times, but it gets confusing or convoluted because they are able to make a lot of money. They're able to earn well, which is great. But their challenge sometimes is some of them are still overspending because they're not looking at their numbers and they're not really mapping out and directing where they want to be spending that money. So until they actually learn a bookkeeping system and they learn to slow down and start looking at the numbers, and then they can start to see what phase of life are they in, what values are important to them, and where do they really want to be directing their money, and they can learn then to live within their income and even be able to save or save more from that. The very first tool that I give is the body check-in, and this comes directly from my somatic psychology training. There are 3 phases in my methodology: money healing, money practices, and money map. So 2/3 of those are very practical, but the very first tool that I want to give to people is the body check-in. And this is learning how to check in with your body and all of these daily money interactions that happen. When you're going to go have a money conversation, when you're going to go online and look at your numbers, when you're going to tell someone your fees. A body check-in is stopping and pausing, asking yourself to check in what's going on a physical level, sensation level, what's the emotion that is coming up. The whole same spectrum of emotions that comes up in other areas of life comes up around money too. Everything from shame to anger to anxiety to sadness to guilt, and then hope and excitement and, everywhere in between. At first, you may still have big emotions coming up, but when you learn how to practice this body check-in tool over and over and over, and remember to do it before a money conversation or even in the heat of the moment or after months of practicing, and then can you imagine years later of practicing it, you will eventually learn how to calm yourself down. We all need to first learn what are the set of emotions that come up for us around money, what are the deeper topics and themes that come up, and then learning what your numbers are and learning a bookkeeping system and learning how to integrate your numbers with your values and your dreams. And all of those make up the tools that go into how to make healthy and good and solid money decisions. So it's a journey to learn this framework.
One of the quotes from your book that really spoke to me, and I think is something that you already touched on, is that money shame is an equal opportunity affliction, and it does not discriminate based on who you are, where you're from, how much you earn, what percentage you save, whether you pay your taxes on time, or what your credit score is, whether you're making a lot of money or not, and how you feel about your safety, enoughness, responsibility, value, and power related to money. That has nothing to do with how much money you have. So related to the body check-in that you mentioned, how does forgiveness fit into that? And how does forgiveness fit into your framework?
So forgiveness comes up in the money healing section, which is what we do at the beginning, right? We do the deeper work of understanding what's your money story, what are your money patterns, what did you learn, what did you not learn? We give you the somatic tools. And forgiveness surprised me because it was one of those concepts and practices that came up almost at the beginning, something that happened from the past, either who they were and how they handled money or how they didn't handle money in a healthy way. And it was what was kind of keeping them from moving forward into the practical parts of learning a bookkeeping system and starting to plan. Everyone had a shame story. Again, no matter what economic background they came from, lineage, heritage, where they grew up, everyone had some level of shame. And shame just means I'm not okay. I don't do this right. Everyone else learned about money except for me. I'm stupid in this area of life. I know I'm smart in many other ways, but I'm stupid here. We may not be able to pinpoint exactly where safety came up as an issue or responsibility or value, but sometimes we can go back, not to dwell on it, but to get some good gems and information and, be more mindful of how this came to be and how we can change going forward. But forgiveness was one of those things that when people would tell me a story like, oh, I did this thing when I was a kid and I stole some gum, or I went through a phase where I was stealing gum, or when I was signing a contract when I was getting married, I didn't read it. These aren't my stories, but I didn't read the contract. And years later, we're now divorcing. And the woman I am now knows my value and worth in such a different way than who I was back then. I wish I had read, the contract. I would have stood up for myself. I would have negotiated different things. And I'm different now, right? So what do we do with that? I added in forgiveness here. And forgiveness is one of those things that a lot of people have written about, a lot of spiritual teachers have written about. Forgiveness happens over many, many months and many, many years, and sometimes time just helps. Sometimes a forgiveness thing can happen in a moment. Who should we forgive? Who should we not forgive? It really ultimately helps us in our lives so that we're not carrying around the shame, the anger. But is it appropriate to have anger about certain situations? Yes. How do you learn how to work with the feelings and emotions on deeper levels, but also at what point do you forgive? And so how can they honor some of those old situations? And everyone I know has strengths around money, challenges around money, moments or situations where they created a mess or made a mistake. We all have that. We just do in life and in money. And it's a journey. Some people change and make shifts in baby steps, tiny little baby steps, small incremental steps over many years. And then you get some big changes or big leaps. But most of us need to do this money work in baby steps. And so just as the forgiveness is a piece in the money healing for some people who, are just really feeling that they made a mistake and want to take some time to honor it. And it could be renaming that debt to that big life transition when I was figuring myself out, to that big trip to Italy that changed my life, to that health crisis, to on and on and on and on and on.
It really is something that I think people need to do a lot of that, emotional literacy and understanding of themselves in order to get there. But I think what you've outlined in your program is exactly part of that money healing process that you need to address first. So you can't just jump into bookkeeping without really having that forgiveness or that sense of who you are and what your patterns are. You do your programs, you said originally 6-week programs, now they're a year long. Do you follow up with a lot of the people who take your courses? Do you think that there are a lot of different money personality or money pattern changes throughout the course of your life? Like whether someone took your class in their 20s and then come back in their 40s with a whole different money pattern problem?
With my year-long program, about 25% of people come back as alumni because it's a lifelong journey. Well, one, because we were not taught so much. There's so much to teach. And then people come back because they want to be in community. They want to have access to me and my teaching assistants. I always have 2 other somatic therapists. We're all so different where we start and where we end and what happens in the middle. So everyone starts at different ages and different phases in their life. At the very beginning of the book, I talk about why people come and what they really want to be working on. And let's see if I can remember them. It's clarity, intimacy, knowledge, peace of mind, success, value, there it is again, and support. People are coming to work on these areas, and depending on where they start, again, most people do this work in small increments, make changes that way. Some people spend the year working on the money healing stuff. And then when they get to the practical, they are able to, they're more willing, they're more excited, their eyes don't glaze over when they look at a financial report or an income and expense statement. We all define money success in different ways. For some people, it is learning how to overcome under-earning and learning how to earn more. For some people, it's learning how to save. Paying for a vacation with cash is life-changing. For other people, learning how to have new money conversations with their spouse, with their parents, with their children, that's life-changing. That's really what people are working on, and they're starting and beginning and ending in all different places. But ultimately, it is a lifelong journey.
Can you talk us through what the difference is between budgeting and value-based bookkeeping?
So I never loved the word budget.
I agree.
I mean, if you do, they're like, it's just a word, budget,
No, we call it the B word in our house.
Okay, the B word. Right? Change it. Come up with a different B word, or just rename it. When I was starting this work 18 years ago, as I mentioned, day one, I had people rename their categories, which people thought was just fun and made it more creative. And they would sit down at their bookkeeping and realize, this is me. This is my life. This is not someone else's life, someone else's money. Let's own it. No one else is telling you what to do. No one else can tell you what to do, but budgeting is wrapped up, as we already said, in so much of it's a tight, rigid diet. Everyone in a family has different values in life and different ways of spending and earning and giving and saving. And so parents and children may have similarities. They may have a lot of differences. Couples, I've never seen two people earn and spend and save and give and loan and invest in the same way. They may have some similarities, but there's going to be some big differences that show up, and that's just something to learn how to work through. Also, early on, I wanted to do a different kind of budgeting, so it wasn't this really rigid, tight approach. If we are in a big transition year, let's say like I was when I first had my child, I had a big complication in my labor and I needed a big recovery time. And I wound up choosing to let go of my business partner and my whole team and go back to a one-woman show and simplify that year. Not all years are the same, but in that year, we did have to simplify. And I did have to be really, really, really extra mindful of where we were spending. We had to choose things that we had to let go of for a period of time. It wasn't forever. We always need to know it's not forever. It's a transition. So there may be times where it's a little more rigid or tight. I used to call it a map of intention. That was my first name 18 years ago. I like that better than budget. And a money map has 3 tiers. And so it's an exercise in itself just to take some time, sit down, and clarify and define what are these 3 tiers. The first tier is what I call basic needs or bottom line. So I want folks to define what that means to them. And then what are the expenses that are real right now? And is there anything else included in this bottom line basic needs that you're not, that's not happening yet? I want to know what the numbers are, what the categories are, and then add that up and see what that number is. And this is your bottom line basic needs. And everyone's different. There's not budget police telling you how to do this. This is you really sitting down to figure out what phase of life are you in? What are your values? What are your priorities? How much are you earning? Tier 2 is comfortable lifestyle. How do you define it as a lifestyle? And then what gets added in comfortable? Do you pay down your debt here? Do you travel more? Do you give more? And then the third tier is ultimate lifestyle. How do you define it? And then what gets added in here? And the thing is that you may sit down and you may only be able to do the first 2 tiers because you're not even close to ultimate. And that just freaks you out, gets you mad, brings up all sorts of things. So you want to start with the first 2, which is great. What's interesting about this is that this stuff goes pretty deep. Here's something that I would like to live into. Here's some intentions and goals. And in order to do a money map, you do need to do the second phase, which is learning a bookkeeping system, learning what your numbers are, learning what your patterns are, really starting to review them. So then you can start plugging them into this money map. So we haven't even talked about money dates. But money dates are just a simple little thing. It's just sitting down, and I like to make it playful. I always have my chocolate out. I always light my candles, and I always play some music. Add whatever you need. And money dates are just checking in weekly, monthly, and asking yourself what needs attention around money and how on track you are with your money map.
Bari, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. You really have given us so much to think about. And, I love your approach of that intersection of emotion and mindfulness and health and wellness and money all coming together in this journey throughout your life.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Bari. It really was so great to have you on, and we really appreciate your time. We'll definitely have to have some dark chocolate together next time we talk. You've been listening to the 411K. Tune in for more podcasts and follow us on Instagram at @the_411K. Cheers!